Hello there. We are the Carpenter developer community meeting to discuss DRA. We're here as a part of SIG Autoscaling, which is a part of CNCF, and we abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct for community meetings. So TLDR, we're going to be kind to one another and respectful. All right. Without further ado, I don't see any specific agenda on today's calendar. I will go ahead and propose that we simply scope this discussion to what we'll present today, this afternoon, in at least in U.S. time zones, to the broader Carpenter community. One point of discussion could be a super simple PR that Alima opened up that demonstrates how we could evolve the current Carpenter implementation to proactively ignore pending pod that declare resource claims. So maybe Jeremy, uh, I don't know you. Maybe Jason knows you super well, but would you mind, because Jason and I and also Alima from Microsoft have been to these before, would you mind doing a quick introduction? So I'll interrupt myself and allow you to say hi and share why you're here.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Jeremy. I am an engineer working on Carpenter enablement at Salesforce. We've been working on it for a couple of years now and just starting to feel comfortable working, having Carpenter enabled in our production environments. I'm here today just sort of to learn what's happening with the community. I haven't come to the community meetings in a while, so want to get back into it.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing and welcome. So yeah, we're here as a sort of formal effort to do the heavy lifting of enabling DRA and Carpenter. So back to what I was saying earlier, I guess to you, Jason, in particular, does that sound like a reasonable scope of discussion for today during the larger group?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so I did get a review out for that PR this morning. I think we should be able to have a pretty fast track to getting it closed. I don't think there's too much controversial about it. It's the comments largely were adding testing, some different formatting for errors. So yeah,
Cool,
we should
cool.
we should be able to
Yeah,
move on that fast. And if we want to present that as like, hey, we're starting to take the first steps.
yeah,
But
great. So I haven't been in touch with Liam this morning. I'm happy to if you want to call out like the sort of um just nuts and bolts of what this would do, and maybe allow folks to share dissent. Like maybe there's a good reason we haven't thought of why the current Carpenter behavior to respond to pending pods with resource claims and build nodes that will almost certainly not fulfill the actual infrastructure requirements is good. But
yeah, and I did call out an option in the PR. We're going to be adding a feature gate, I assume, for DRA support in Carpenter.
yeah,
And so we could potentially block this same behavior behind a feature gate. That way, for users who do want to opt out of it, they can choose to do so. But yeah, that's something we can raise there. It's not something I
okay,
have a
cool.
super strong opinion on personally, but is a discussion that probably needs to be had.
Yeah, great. I think the community feedback will be super informative there. I assume the Carpenter feature gate interface is already mature, like there's already a way to do that.
Yeah, there's a feature gates environment variable that's been available, I think, since like v0.26 or something.
Okay, cool.
It's been around for a long time. So, and it is our standard practice for how we adopt new features. So like node overlay is currently alpha, or well, will be alpha once it's released. That's behind a feature gate. Reserved capacity also behind a feature gate, though now it's in beta. So when we follow a very similar mechanism to Kubernetes, alpha enabled by default or disabled by default. When it graduates to beta, becomes you. It is enabled by default, but can still disable it. And then, yeah, once it goes GA, can't be disabled anymore.
Cool. Great. Makes sense. All right. I think that's all I had for agenda for today. Does anyone want to pop anything onto the stack?
I think I did want to kind of start the discussion around the different user stories to get an idea of what we want to include for the MVP of DRA. I think, as we've discussed before, it's a very broad feature, especially when you look at all of the additional alpha caps that have been opened for it and
Yeah.
merged. We're not going to support everything in our initial implementation, but I do think there's a subset of those features that we should target support for, particularly around some of the open issues that have been open in Carpenter, feature requests that people have had for a long time. Particularly, I'm thinking around partitionable devices and consumable capacity. So those two
Okay.
caps. One of Carpenter's most upvoted features is support for time slicing of NVIDIA GPUs. So partitionable capacity, I mean, if you look at the cap, like the motivating example was being able to do time slicing and dynamic configuration of, I don't know if MIG devices is like the right terminology. So yeah, I apologize if I get some of the terminology wrong, but dynamically provisioning these like MIG sub GPUs out of a single NVIDIA GPU. I think this would be, I don't think it's necessarily a straightforward extension to what we would be building, but I also think scoping it in early ensures we're making the right architecture decisions
Yeah.
to be able to support it. And
Yeah. No, I think having these specific subsets of DRA functionality be declared and driven is great. That's the right approach because there is a ton of surface area, feature surface area.
yeah, so that's one of the main ones that I think like hitting early on in the initial release, or at the very least as a fast follow, um, is important. Making sure that we're including it in the initial architecture scoping. Similarly for multi-node devices, I think at least for AWS and ECAS, we just released support for GB200 instances. So we want to make sure that we are able to support some of the work that NVIDIA has been doing with the compute config and being able to configure these shared GPU memory across nodes um,
Yeah.
using DRA. So I know that's the initial, like that was what was initially built out for the NVIDIA DRA driver. I do believe they're adding support for more standard partitionable devices and time slicing in the 134 release. We're planning on releasing it alongside 134. But so yeah, those
So
multi-node.
just to be clear, I assume there's no way for Carpenter node pools so if you want to use GB200 on EKS, you have to create a static node pool, so to speak, with that uses
No,
like all 18 nodes kind of thing.
you should be able to use it with Carpenter. It wouldn't support DRA.
Yeah, I
You would
see.
likely be using it in the form of a static node pool. For AWS, we expose these as something called capacity blocks, and Carpenter added native support for capacity blocks in v1.6 for the
Got
AWS
it.
provider. So no, it
Cool.
should be possible to use them today, but this is where you would need that backdoor to use DRA. Like you would probably, if you wanted to use this with Carpenter, we're actually shipping an RFC and soon a feature to support static capacity node pools. Likely what you would do is create a static capacity node pool and then basically use it as though you were using just a standalone node group and not necessarily use the dynamic provisioning capabilities.
Yeah, cool. So we've been involved with NVIDIA on their development of basically the entire DRA ecosystem around GB200 and eventually GB300 and et cetera, et cetera. And they have this notion of a compute domain resource, which is a sort of DRA native resource that abstracts away the IMEX channel. I'm not sure if you're aware of the GB200 architecture. So it sounds like there's a different way to use GB200, and so because just the reason I bring this up, that would be an interesting use case for Carpenter, and it's fairly concrete. I mean, I know that I just mentioned two potential architectures, but GB300 is not a thing yet. So, but
Mhm.
we could bake in the compute domain use case if we wanted to do so.
Yeah, and I wasn't thinking for initial scoping necessarily supporting compute domains directly. I was thinking more than likely that would be either like there's more, I guess, discovery and research that needs to be done on my part to understand exactly how we could integrate with it natively. I was
Yeah,
more so wanting to make sure that we support these resource slices, which can select against multiple nodes, because I know that that's used to model the IMAX channel,
yeah,
which is provisioned when you create a compute domain.
yeah. Cool. Where should we take notes about this? Or do you have
I've
an
got notes
alternate?
already that I'm planning on copying into the RFC.
Okay,
They're
cool.
quite well structured enough yet to just copy paste over. But that's going to be the bulk of my work over the next week is trying to get the user stories into a presentable state for the RFC, making sure that there are actual like concrete examples of how this would work with Carpenter rather than just bullet points of this is kind of what we need to support. Um,
Okay, cool. Well, I
Yep.
think for I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead if you have more to add there.
I was just going to say the other thing I'm working on is based on those, I'm starting to work on the architecture for this is the changes we need to make to cluster state. This is the way that we need to model the relationship between like resource slices, the pools for resource slices with existing nodes, in-flight nodes, etc. So yeah,
Okay,
start
cool.
to go from those user stories and get an idea of what our architecture needs to look like.
Makes sense. So I was going to say, just coming back to what we'll present to the larger community this afternoon. Um, I think just making it super clear because maybe folks aren't going to be aware about the DRA is not a monolith. Like when we talk about DRA and Kubernetes, we're talking about I mean, you could sort of summarize it as a standard API for, flexible scheduling constraints and supporting advanced topologies.
Mhm.
But it's worth pointing out, and I'll try to do this as concisely as possible to the larger group, that DRA actually is a manifold implementation of lots of different things. And our approach in Carpenter is going to sort of survey that landscape. Um, maybe maybe we'll assume that we're going to start with 134 because things are still very fluid. But maybe
Mhm.
at the 134 marker, we can assess the set of features that are either beta or forward, or maybe we can include alpha features if we want, if they seem stable enough. And we will pick only a small subset of those for, let's say a Carpenter MVP and DRA, a DRA MVP and Carpenter. So we can just present that as an approach and let folks sort of digest that a little bit. So there isn't an expectation that Carpenter will be like DRA feature complete, if that's even possible to define given the nature of DRA.
Right, yeah, and that's in line with what I'm thinking. One of the things I was doing this past week was reviewing all of the caps that have been opened and trying to figure out which of these are the most impactful for Carpenter to support, which of these actually will help support kind of features that have been on our roadmap that we haven't been able to support up until now. And as far
Okay,
as I
cool.
can
And we
tell, yeah, the main thing is base structured parameter, like the base DRA implementation, and then also partitionable devices and consumable capacity.
great. And we can bring that, or I'm happy. I go to the device management working group discussions and I'll be around next week. That's Tuesday morning PST. And I think that's probably enough time. We'll have a decent idea of what maybe we plan to implement in Carpenter, and I can present that to them and just get some feedback from the DRE ecosystem, so to speak. Like, does this smell like the right set of baseline functionality that you'd want to see in a tool like Carpenter?
Yeah, it would be good to have that feedback. What time did you say that was?
That is at 8:30 a.m. It's actually not on the Kubernetes community calendar, but it is in the Kubernetes / Kates.io repository. There's like each SIG and working group has its own directory with a sort of markdown README and relevant how to get involved in the community content. So yeah, working group device management.
Okay. Yeah, well, I will
And if
try.
I'm wrong, I'm calling that up from memory because I've gone a bunch to so many. But if I'm wrong, definitely double check my
Sure.
memory there.
Yeah, if it's, I will see if I'm able to attend next week because I'd definitely like to hear that feedback firsthand. Um, and I will try and get the RFC updated with some of those user stories and like this is the motivation for why we think this is the feature set that we want to support out of the gate.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure if I'll be able to. I'm I've been on call for the past week and a half and still on
Okay.
call for a bit. So my the time I have is limited. But
Got it. Got it.
if I'm able to, I will try and get that updated.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm sure I'll have all the information, if not everything, um, in fine detail in your brain, so I can just pass on the info if it's just me there.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had for the time being.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I'll I'm happy to put those two. I'll add to the. I'm going to the Carpenter Working Group doc after this and add those two bullet points. I'll probably add just like a top level DRA updates bullet point and then add a link to the PR that you've reviewed of the Limas. And I will also just queue up a quick discussion topic for how we want to approach the DRA MVP and then we're going to pick a subset of features.
Yeah, and my
And
hope
then
is
I'll invite folks to this meeting if
yeah,
they want to join.
sounds great. Yeah, my hope is that we can dial in that subset of features by the time we meet next week, and then target getting a draft of the RFC, not necessarily a completed state, but a draft that we can maybe get up on the GitHub repo and start having people review or start encouraging external review within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Sounds great. Fantastic. Okay. I think maybe we can give a few minutes back for our time. Good luck with on call.
All right, thanks.
See ya. Thanks for joining, Jeremy.